So in this video, we're going to look at a lot of code modification and refactoring functionality. And we're going to be using our friend Altento a lot here. So let's start by fixing up those warnings we saw in the last section. So as we mentioned, the inspections have picked up quite a few different things, like we've got grayed out areas here. If we hover over, it explains why. We've got yellow squigglies here for warnings. We've got suggestions in green here. We've even got a spelling warning here as well. So going down here, if I do Alt Enter, then it's suggesting that we use the targeted type new. And as I've mentioned before, we can do this here, and we can even do it across the entire solution. But if I just click here or press enter, then it's changed it. But we've got another suggestion here, which says use collection expression. So Alt Enter again, enter, and that's changed it again. So again, we can see that this has really helped us discover new language syntax. If we look at this green squiggly, it says it can be made static, so Alt Enter, enter. So it's made it static. If I hover over this question mark, which is grayed out, it says that it can be made non-nullable. So let's do that. Alt Enter, make method non-nullable. And you can see it's got rid of this warning here because now it's non-nullable. If I look at this for each, which says it can be converted into a link expression, Alt Enter, I'll let it convert it, and it's changed it to this. Now, I personally prefer link to be on its own line. So what we can do, we can go to settings. So if you remember, it's Control Shift and S. It might be different on the Mac or in your settings, and go to editor and then go to code style and C#. So there's a whole bunch of customizations here. I'm not going to go through them all, but just as an example, line breaks and wrapping here. I'm going to scroll right down. I believe it is this one, wrap chained method calls. So I personally prefer that being always chop. And when we save this, we can just save it, or we can choose whether it's going to be on this computer, personally just for this solution, or team shared. If I choose this, for example, and I'm going to head over to Git, this commit, and look at unversioned files, we can see it's created this file, which has that information, so that can be checked into source control. We'll talk more about Git and version control later on in the course. So now I've made that change. If I undo that, and do this again, Alt Enter, convert to link expression, it's now done it how I would format it. I think I undid a bit too far, so let me just bring that back again. And then all these changes we did. So if we look at the top right, we can see we've still got some yellow, and I tend to aim to try and get everything green so there's no warnings, so that when I do get a warning, it stands out and it's not lost in the noise. And you can see one of the warnings, this yellow one, is that this isn't used, which makes this kind of pointless, having this. So for now, let's just return it. Now, of course, we've got an error because this method doesn't take a return type. But again, we can use Alt Enter, and we can choose to change the type of the method to that type. So you can see how we're kind of Alt Entering our way through things. But we've got another one. This return type isn't being used by anything that calls it. And if this was public, it would be checking the entire code base to see if anything was using it. So these grayed out bits are really useful for discoverability. So I'm only using it here, but what I can do is Alt Enter, introduce a variable. And I can tab through and give that a name, but I'm not going to at the moment because I want to show something else. That's obviously not an ideal name, but we'll come back to that. So we're kind of just moving the problem here because this is then unused. So let's just do something with that. It's a list of string, and let's just for each through it. Now I'm going to talk about this in the next section when we talk about live templates, but I've typed for each. I'm just going to press the tab key. I'm going to type my private method. I'm going to press tab again, and let's just call it item because it's an item in a list. So again, you've had a little teaser for live templates, which we'll talk about in the next section. And let's just do console.write line item. So we are nearly with 0 warnings. We can see at the top, we've got the squiggly. And rather than clicking on it, what I'm going to do is press Alt and page up. So I can do Alt and page up and page down to go to the next warning. And we can see that this is unused. Alt Enter again, and then enter, and that's removed it. So now we've got green, which is what we were aiming for. So let's have a look at some other things we can do here. And again, this code doesn't really do anything. It's just code that we can play around with. So another useful shortcut is to inline something. So here, I'm assigning a variable, then returning it. So there's kind of no real need to actually assign that to a variable. We can just return this. So if I click on here, I'm going to mouse click over here, because if you recall, we've got these shortcuts: navigate to, refactor this, inspect this, generate code. And we've spoken about all of these, but again, we can discover them quite well by just clicking here and then choosing one. But it's the refactor this one I'm interested in. So if we do Control Shift and R, then within the context of where my mouse is, where my cursor was, then we've got some options, and it's inline variable, which is quite useful, which is RI, so refactor inline. So let's use that. If I click here and do Control RI, then that has just returned the result. So it's basically inlined it. Going back to this variable, which is a bad name, my favorite method, another shortcut that you'll find yourself using very often is Control RR. Again, it might be different depending on your configuration. And you can see it's highlighted both there and there with the usages. So let's do that again, Control RR, and let's call this items. So I've just typed out items, and that's renamed it. Now, obviously, this is a very localized example, but the same shortcut applies across your entire solution. So let's take this public method and do Control RR. This time we get a pop-up, and I'm just going to put 2 on the end for this example, and then next. So it's changed that there. If I go to the interface, so if you remember the control and click, we can see it's changed it there. If I do Shift and F12 to go to the implementations, we can see the usages have been changed as well. So imagine a massive code base where you've got a method used all over the place, and you do Control RR, and you can just change it everywhere. And that applies to variables, properties, class names, anything you can think of, even project names and solution names. For a method or something that has a signature, you can also do, so let's do Control Shift and R again for refactor this. There's another option, change signature. And this does a pop-up. So again, you can rename it here, but you can do more things. You can change the return type. I can add parameters. So I could say string, I don't know, name, next. And it gives you a choice of how you want to handle that. So I tend to just leave it as this default one. If I do next, then that choice is giving me a to do. So I can go and fix that up myself. If I actually go to the implementation, control click, we can see it's added that there. If I go to the interface, that's there as well. And the usages have these to-dos in them so that we can follow the compiler errors to fix those up. I'll undo that change because we don't need that. And I'm going to change this back so it doesn't have the 2 on the end. Just like where I showed the Control RR can be used here or up here, for example, and different places, the same applies for Control Shift R as well. So if I do that here, we get refactor this up here, which is slightly different because it's context aware. But like, for example, we can do adjust namespaces. So that'll fix up the namespaces across the entire project in this case. I can do the same at a solution level. So we can start to see a few different patterns emerging with discovering shortcuts and functionality with just a very small amount of keyboard shortcuts. So for example, the Control Shift R for refactor this in different places. And in fact, any of these, when you click on the Alt Enter or this icon in the gutter, any of these, navigate to, refactor this, inspect this, generate code, all of these make it very discoverable, and you can use the same patterns in various different places, whether it's your code editor and the cursor is over different things versus on the Solution Explorer. So let's have a look at some more things. Let's go to my implementation again. Let's collapse this and let's just write some code. Let's do if items is not null. So here, so a very useful tip here is when you're near the end of a line, you can do Control Shift Enter, and then that will kind of intelligently insert braces or finish off that line, which is very useful. And say, let's do if items count is greater than 1, for example. Control Shift Enter to finish that off. So let's go with that. So this is warning items is always true. So actually, let's just fix that. Let's make this nullable. Okay, so say we've got a bit of code like this. Now it's not actually showing a squiggly, I thought it would. But if we go into the if statement and do our usual Alt and Enter, we still have refactoring options. So we can invert the if statement or we can do null propagation. So let's do that. So that has introduced another language feature, which has dramatically cleaned things up. Let's have a look at another example. Let's do a switch statement and let's use items.count again. And then again, Control Shift and Enter to complete those braces. Now let's just do case 1. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var foo equals, so I'll do a string there, and we're going to say foo equals 1. And let's duplicate this line, so Control D. I'll change this to 2 and 3. Change this to 2 and 3. So there, when I deleted it, I just did Control and backspace, and that gets rid of a word at a time. So very similar to lots of other editors and IDEs and Notepad, I think. So what I want to show here is we've got this suggestion here, and I will bet this is change it to switch expression. And it does, it says convert to switch expression, which is a more modern language syntax. So if I've got code like this, it's actually suggesting, oh, this would be better as a switch expression. So I do enter, and it's rewritten it for me. So again, all these little things to teach you about language syntax and clean up your code. It's warning us that items can be null, because remember we changed it to nullable. So I can alt enter and do a check, and it's wrapped in an if statement. Or if I undo that, actually what I'll do is get rid of this. I don't need this anymore, because we only added that nullable return when we were demoing this thing. And we can see here it's telling us we don't need that anymore. But we've done that example, so I'm going to get rid of that. So what else can we show? Okay, let's do extract method, which is quite useful. So say you've got a big long method which has lots of different things in, and you want to break it down into smaller private methods. What you can do, you can select a block, and again, Control-Shift-R for refactor this. And this time it's detected you've selected the block, so it's only showing one. Extract method, enter. And I can choose whether I want it to be a method or a local function, so I'll choose method. It's asking for a name, I can change things, but let's go with the default. And that's now created this method. It's moved it into its own method. And it's detected what parameters we needed, because this was done outside of that block we selected. It would also detect return values if that was required. In fact, if I Control Z to undo that, and let's say foo, let's just do console.writeLine foo, just so we're using that somewhere. And then I'm going to select this and do the same again. So Control-Shift-R for refactor this, press enter. We could have done Control-R-M to go directly to refactor this. In fact, let's do that. Control-R-M. And it's popped up that. I'll press enter, and I'll press enter again, select the defaults. And we can see because it detected that the code outside of that selected block required foo, it's going to return it. And then again, we can go here, actually, we can improve this code because we're doing what we did before. We're assigning a variable to return it, so we don't need that variable. So I can click here. So if you remember, Control-R-I to inline it. I can go to here, Alt-Enter, and choose expression body member to clean that up. So that's then a lot cleaner. So you can see there, I wasn't doing any coding. I was just Alt-tabbing or using these shortcuts to refactor it. Some other quick useful tips just whilst I'm here before we wrap up. If you've got the cursor over a property or method or something, and you do Control-Shift-Alt and up and down, you can move that whole method or property or whatever it is up and down. So I'm just pressing Control-Shift-Alt and up and down. So that's a great way to reorder things. The last couple of things I want to show in this video is auto format. So say this was indented wrong. In the options, you can configure this, but if I do that semicolon, it's fixed it. If that was indented wrong again, if I redid that closing brace, then it's fixed it up. You can also do Control, Alt, and Enter, and that does it across the entire file. So if I let's just mesh up the indentation, let's do a few things. Do that. Let's put that on a new line. And then Control, Alt, and Enter. Then it's based on the rules you've given it in the settings or your editor config, it'll reformat it and tidy it up and make it neat again. In this case, I don't want that. So that's useful. You can also do right click and you can say reformat and clean up. So Control E and C in this case. And you can go through and do this kind of thing in bulk as well across the whole solution, the project you've just selected. So you can choose your scope here, and there's various different options we can choose. So there's a lot of stuff there, but as I say, it's very discoverable by using those shortcuts, by even clicking here and seeing these actions. And also, as I mentioned earlier, just as part of your day-to-day coding, just to introduce a few at a time so it starts to become more muscle memory. In the next section, we're going to be looking at these live templates. You've got a bit of a taster there, but they're way more powerful than I showed there. And we're going to dig into how to write and customize your own.